Akash Network is a marketplace for unused computer capacity. Welcome, Greg. And you're a seasoned developer, entrepreneur. You got 25 plus years of experience. So tell us a little bit about yourself, how you came up with the idea for Akash Network.
Thanks, Jen. To simply put, I build things for people that build things. Been a programmer for a little over 25 years, in which my last 15 years have been building tools for developers. My passion really began with a company I founded called Angel Hack that I created to take hackathons to masses, right? And I helped several companies there launch, a notable one being Firebase, which got acquired by Google and eventually became Google Cloud's most used database. And Angel Hack was really where I gained an incredible insight into understanding developers, more particularly on common problems, which happen to be deployment. Deployment means taking what you developed on your workstation and making it available to your users in a scalable and hopefully a simple way. And that problem was a common problem back then, even now, and founded a company, Overclock Labs, to solve this problem. So we created software to make applications or internet applications fast by going to the edge. And essentially, customers would deploy the software in their data centers. Data centers are these machines which house other smaller computers that serve the cloud. So our software made it extremely simple to use data centers. And while we were deploying, we discovered that most capacity in these data centers, somewhere north of 85% of capacity remains unused for various reasons. And that's when the idea for a marketplace came about. And Akash Network was born with that intent to take that unused capacity, make it available in an open and a permissionless setting where the price is driven by the forces of demand supply in a free market setting.
Very interesting. And it just makes everything more efficient. I mean, you're using what's already out there. And so, cloud computing power, I don't even know if the public realizes how much we use cloud. There's, Netflix and DoorDash and just about all these apps that we use. Of course, Amazon Web Services, Google, Microsoft Azure, all those very well known. I mean, how do you fit into all those traditional cloud services?
Great question. So cloud today is about $370 billion market. Essentially, if you think of cloud as the central fabric to our modern society, everything you and I do, all our data, all our compute is, stored on the cloud in some form, right? This cloud is essentially someone else's computer residing in machines like data centers. So Amazon, Google, Microsoft, and even Alibaba control up to 80% of this market, of this $370 billion market. And they do that by offering services that are simple for companies to use on a on-demand basis. So if you want a data center, you can go to these companies and rent them on demand. Whereas Akash takes a little different approach. Instead of owning our data centers, we go and tap into unused capacity. Like I said, 85% or so of capacity in 8.4 million data centers globally is unused. So we take this capacity and we offer a cloud that's designed around a modern developer, really putting developers in first. What that means is Akash developers set the price instead of companies setting their price like in your traditional cloud. So that creates a more equitable and more open system. And to give you an analogy, Akash is like Airbnb for compute, whereas Amazon is like Hilton for compute. Now, you can go to Hilton and get consistent service and you can get consistent breakfast or even bed sheets. But where you go to Amazon, Airbnb, you can get all kinds of variety that you don't normally get on a Hilton. So Akash is like Airbnb for computational services or cloud services.
Interesting. And you mentioned a couple of things there. I mean, like peer-to-peer, that is like such a big part of the whole blockchain system. And you're really the first decentralized marketplace, peer-to-peer marketplace for cloud computing. So can you give an overview of that? Like, has open source, the decentralized cloud, how you're leveraging the blockchain to be able to do that?
Right. So Akash is a fully open source cloud, whereas companies like Amazon, Google, they are closed source, right? And that's a big difference. The big difference is if you consider cloud to be the most critical fabric of our society, and increasingly, gaining in importance, having such a critical system closed presents a few problems, because there is no public scrutiny on the code that goes to serve all our data, and there is no guarantees that this code is going to function because of lack of transparency, right? So, and that the result is obvious. I mean, we see several outages, in last few months because of centralized infrastructure failing, Akamai failing, Amazon failing, not because they can't scale, it's just because they move so fast in such an opaque manner, we don't know what's going on the bottom, right? So Akash takes an open approach. An open approach has incredible properties just beyond transparency. It allows for participation from larger public, right? So Akash, most of our content today doesn't come from the core team, but rather comes from contributors worldwide coming and sharing the same value set and sharing and really want to see an open cloud succeed. So characteristics of a decentralization, when you combine decentralization with open source, you end up creating a permissionless and a self-sovereign cloud. What that means is anyone can participate in Akash, be it a kid in Africa. The other day I saw some tweet where this kid doesn't have a bank account and couldn't really access Amazon because he doesn't have a credit card, but their first cloud experience was Akash Network. There are about 1 billion people in the planet that don't have credit card access but want to use the cloud. So anywhere from people like that to engineers sitting in Silicon Valley that are very open source, has open source ethos, can participate in this new cloud where you couldn't do that with Amazon or Microsoft, right? So by leveraging blockchain, we're able to create a permissionless system, and permissionless systems are generally known to scale at a global scale, internet being a big example. When internet was broken from the jails of AOL, we really saw the penetration that it has today. And similarly, Akash is doing that to cloud computing.
Mm-hmm. So now you kind of touched on this a little bit, the whole decentralization and how it benefits people, how it can bring people into the mix that maybe otherwise wouldn't be. Can you expand on that a little bit? Why is that such an important piece? Great.
So decentralization could mean many things, but from a core perspective, I think decentralization is a difference between expansionary versus repurposing, right? So if you look at Akash's case, we don't, versus Amazon, right? We don't go build new data centers. We tend to reuse what the existing infrastructure that's already been deployed. So that way, the outcome of that repurposing and recycling tends to be lower cost in the initial stages, right? Akash offers a significantly lower cost price point because the price is driven by a market and a free market, and faster scale because of permissionless systems. You can actually, by removing friction between peer-to-peer interaction, you can create the virality that unlocks the permissionless and the massive global scale a system is intended to attract. And it's greener because we're not an expansionary. We are repurposing already existing data centers. We are much more carbon efficient than some of these expansionary systems, right? And I think decentralization really comes down to when you have industries that have enormous efficiencies like the cloud, which is essentially an oligopoly. And oligopolies, we know, they not with their core intentions, but they end up creating this competitive modes and thereby results in inefficiencies. Akash is a solution to this oligopolized world where instead of trying to get new resources and trying to deploy new resources, is repurposing the existing resources. So I think, on a broader scale, decentralization generally means a more equitable. It is the largest, I would say, the the great equalizer, right? When it comes, if you look at what's happening with Bitcoin or Ethereum or general, money distribution. Similarly, what Bitcoin did to money, I think Akash is doing that to cloud computing.
Very interesting. So we had Web 1.0, that was kind of the 90s. The 2.0 was like the 2000s, the aughts. And it feels like we're in Web 3.0 now. Can you walk us through what that is and what that will mean for the world?
Right. So the Web 1.0 created the data center. The idea that, well, you need a powerful enough computer to serve your customers, and you can't house those computers in your home. You put that in a larger machine called data centers, which are dedicated to serve your customers at scale. The Web 1 created the data center. Web 2 created the idea of a cloud provider, because the Web 1, the data center inherently had inefficiency problems because you don't end up using all the compute that you have deployed already. So the cloud service providers kind of came about in Web 2 as a solution to the Web 1 inefficiencies, whereas Web 3 is solving for the Web 1 inefficiencies and removing the problems created by Web 2, which essentially the cloud service providers here on became the middleman and thereby became rent seekers without adding really much value, maybe marginal value than Web 1. So Web 3 is about going back to the roots, to the original design of the internet as a decentralized system and solving for some of the inefficiencies that the system created, and also learning from some of the benefits of Web 2 and bringing them together, right? So, for example, in cloud today, Amazon Web Services offer actually a pretty valuable service for customers, which is on-demand pricing, right? So Akash is similarly taking the on-demand pricing model, in fact, optimizing and making it better, and giving a very similar experience to its users, but at price point significantly lower, and repurposing the data centers, right? So every stack of the cloud today is getting decentralized, all the way from bandwidth allocation. You have networks like Sentinel or Helium or Orchid that is essentially taking bandwidth and repurposing bandwidth, thereby creating bandwidth marketplaces. Then you have discovery layers, such as Handshake or ENS domains that are decentralizing DNS. Then you have compute layer. Akash is a player there. Then you have the storage layer. We have Filecoin and Skynet and RView that's decentralizing storage. And you have other ancillary services like indexing, which does graph protocol, or LivePeer, which does video encoding. So every element of the stack is decentralizing, and Akash, being the compute layer, is the glue that brings all these decentralized network in a form that's easily available to the developer. So what we're seeing is a revolution in Web3 infrastructure, and what's great about today is a lot of these networks are actually gaining in adoption, gaining in revenue very rapidly, and before we know it, we're going to, as an industry, I think, be better off, and we're going to start seeing some of the benefits passed on back to users. So someone like using Netflix, or someone, everyday users are actually paying an invisible Amazon tax, if you know it or not, and that will be lowered without even knowing what happened, right? So Web3 is this infrastructure layer that's optimizing and building a more equitable cloud.
Okay, very interesting. It's going to be interesting to see where all this goes. So Akash Network just launched in March of this year, which is amazing. You've come so far. I mean, tell me, who is your typical user of the decentralized cloud? What does your growth look like, would you say, in the near term?
Great. So Akash has, I would say, two classes of users, right? One, you have the utilitarian user, and then you have the innovator. So the utilitarian user is someone that is using the cloud and shifting to Akash because of the benefits Akash provides. And that usually, and if you look at Akash, the core of Akash is an exchange. So it's an exchange between those who have compute power to those that want. So like in every exchange, the first set of users are going to be arbitragers, right? So when it comes to Akash, And arbitrages are great because they add efficiency to markets, especially if you look at what happens in money markets. So similarly, on Akash, the arbitragers for compute are miners. So mining is in cryptocurrency. Mining is I would classify mining as a way to abstract value in a tokenized asset that is probably liquid, right? So we have enormous amounts of miners that understood the lower cost cloud has its benefits, and permissionless is very, very attractive to a lot of them, and they're contributing to a lot of our growth. And we see right now in early markets that happens, but as the network is growing, we're seeing a lot more very interesting use cases. And I think we foresee most of our use cases coming from machine learning. Machine learning is a different type of mining. It's not cryptocurrency mining, but machine learning for me is also abstracting value in a knowledge unit, right? So we see machine learning because there's so much ubiquitous compute available, all the way from gaming PCs to Ethereum network, coming from proof of work to proof of stake to even self-driving vehicles. Each of these vehicles have about 6 GPUs, and we're in early conversations with some of these makers that want to repurpose some of the unused capacity because they're charging in the night. So we see mining today, but future is machine learning, right? And in terms of growth, we're doubling in every month. Today we have about 500 live applications running on Akash. That number was 400 about a week ago, and 200 about 4 weeks ago before that, and about 100 4 weeks ago before that. So it's rapidly gaining in growth, and with very little marketing efforts. And I like to call our competitive mode is really community building.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I mean, it's also interesting. So let's wrap it up with here. So what are some cool things that people have built on the Akash network?
So we're seeing incredible, so like we have utilitarians who are there to essentially arbitrage or doing the same thing what they're doing on the cloud, right? So anything you can run on the cloud can run on Akash. And now we have the innovators. And these innovators are using Akash for its particular properties to build amazing stuff that are not possible in the cloud. One is NFTs. So we have NFT gaming, essentially, because Akash provides this beautiful, infrastructure to run gaming servers really close to the user. So we have NFT games like Strange Clan that's being built right now on Akash, and Minecraft servers being run on Akash because Akash is much simpler. So we have this convergence of NFT and gaming that's being deployed on Akash. And we see DAOs. DAOs are decentralized autonomous organizations. Essentially, they're this amazing way to bring people together and collaborate. And they use several tools like forums and chat servers and all these tools that they use to collaborate. Now, if you're running a DAO, to run those services on a centralized infrastructure is not practical, because you need to elect somebody that has control and that's going to disclose their credit card information and their personal identifiable information on Amazon, which is not ideal. So Akash provides multi-party computations too. So we're seeing several DAOs using Akash, the big one being Osmosis. Osmosis is a #1 decentralized exchange for Cosmos ecosystem, and it's one of the biggest users of Akash. And we are seeing other DAOs like Shapeshift that is considering Akash, and I will be on the community call to explore how to answer some of the community questions on how Akash fits into the play on September 9th. So we're seeing several innovative use cases from DAOs. And then we have just unstoppable, WordPress websites. Enormous amount of 33% of the internet runs on WordPress. So there is this uncensorable WordPress sites running on Akash, and we have social networks such as Desmos. And recently I saw an example which was very fascinating by a network called Althea. Althea is trying to decentralize internet access by creating a multi-hop network. And they're one of the first networks to offer 5G at a significantly lower cost than the competitors being AT&T. Now, they're leveraging Akash to do dynamic bandwidth pricing, where the outcome is significantly lower cost, which is then passed on to this internet customers. So people like you and I will be using Akash without even knowing we're using Akash by organizations like Althea. So a lot of very innovative use cases that are not possible in the cloud today are being built on Akash, and it's only a matter of time we'll start actually using Akash without knowing we're using Akash.
Very interesting. And I have more questions, but I'm going to save them for the next time we talk, Greg. So, so we have something to talk about. So interesting. Awesome. Thank you so much for coming and telling us about Akash Network. And I look forward to our next conversation.